Hi guys, it's Ivan here. Welcome back to the YouTube channel. I'm just kidding. I'm not going to be doing all that. I am not Miss Mia. So here we're going to go over the distributive property. Um, this one, in my opinion, is a little tricky if you're just learning it. Uh, some of you guys learned this in 6th grade, maybe even 5th grade, and for some reason we come into 8th grade and forget about it. Pretty important, so that I'll review it here. Today as well in a tutorial, we had a student who was an 8th grader and was a bit confused. Like I said, I won't name him. He knows who he is though. And we went over it. So I thought if he's confused, anybody else can be confused. It's perfectly okay to be confused. So the distributive property is, let me get my pencil here. And if any of you guys for some reason are curious on what this is written on, this is an iPad with good notes. Okay. And then I write these with a little Apple pencil. Okay. That's just if you're curious. I doubt you guys really care. Um, We're going to start with a visual of what's going on. Okay, so that's why we have X, A, B, C. Okay, these are just placeholders, right? They're technically variables, so they could be any number, whatever your heart desires. So let's get started. In problems like these, we have to distribute the X. It's not always X, all right? Like I just mentioned, these are just placeholders. The X can be a 7, the X can be a million, the X could be a billion. It could be whatever it wants to be. The only thing you have to really remember is that X here is distributing over, okay? And if you notice, there's an order to this. The X distributes to the first thing in the parentheses, to the second, and to the third, okay? That's why those little numbers are there. Now, we're gonna apply this right away. Like I said, I don't really think this concept requires too much explanation. I think you guys just need to practice it and understand what's going on, okay? So, in this situation, we're given this problem here, and the 7 is outside of a parentheses. And now, PEMDAS does tell you to do whatever's in the parentheses first. And in this problem, you'll notice that you can do that because this adds up to 9, and then 7 times 9 is 63. Okay. I'm going to do it the way I've always done it, where I do these individually and then I combine like terms. Okay. And the reason for that is because eventually, believe it or not, you're going to use this property on problems that have different variables, different terms. And it can just be really tricky with all the positive and negatives and combining if you do it first. Okay. So I've always just done it out of this. It's a bit extra work. If you know that adds up to 9 and 7 times 9 is 63, by all means go for it. Okay. So if you notice here, I'm distributing the 7 to the 2. 7 times 2 is 14. So I redo my parentheses because I haven't combined what's in there. I'm only distributing. And then in a different color, I distribute the 7 to the 3. Okay. 7 times 3 is 21. That's why there's a 21 here. And then finally, 7 times 4, right? 7 times 4 is 28. And then as I just mentioned, all of this here combines to give you 63. Okay. That's how this property works. All right. After we distribute, you should combine like terms if you didn't already. Like I said, some of you guys are going to pick this up instantly and that's fine. All right. I've just always done it like this despite the extra work because you will make mistakes and I'd rather be able to check my work thoroughly than assume what I did wrong. And then here's the next part of this. Obviously, there's negatives. Oh, Milk is Juice is playing Phasmophobia. That's nice to know. So we're going to consider negatives. Looking at this problem. Okay. So if you notice, we have 5 minus 7 and then this in the parentheses. Once again, you can add up the parentheses. There's nothing wrong with that here because it's pretty easy. I personally just don't do that. All right. I'm mentioning right here, I personally always distribute before combining the terms. So if you notice here, we have 5 minus 7. Okay. This would be -2. But like I said, this is just a personal thing. And I would honestly really recommend you guys do it unless you're on a time crunch. But you guys are giving 50 minutes for every problem. I don't think a time crunch is really an issue here. So I always recommend you distribute the number and the sign in front of it. So if this was 5 plus 7, you're distributing a positive 7. In our case, it's 5 minus 7, so we're going to distribute a negative 7, okay? You can distribute just a 7, but it's going to get really tricky when you have to figure out your signs, okay? I'm not going to show you how to do that. I don't recommend it at all, okay? So just always take the sign with it. So let's watch that in action, okay? I'm not going to highlight because it's already color coded. So if you notice, well, I'm lying, I will highlight. You notice I take my 7, distribute it to the 5. I distribute a negative 7 though, giving me negative 35. Okay. Keep doing that, my bad. And then next is negative 7 to negative 8. A negative times a negative gives a positive. All right. Last is negative 7 with positive 10. That gives you negative 70. And then you bring down the 5 because the 5 has nothing to do with this. It's, it's just outside. So then you just add it all together. 5 minus 35 plus 56 minus 70 gives you negative 44. Okay. These are big negative numbers. I would hope you guys understand how to do this. Um, if you don't, I just really recommend you practice, okay? It is so important to know how negatives work, okay? So there's not much I could tell you on how I got negative 4 here besides I just know. 5 minus 35 is, well, now I'm confused on it. But, well, look at me. We all make mistakes, huh? But yeah, basically, just knowing how to subtract this. All right, if you're given a calculator, just do that. But it's always good to know how to do it personally, even though I just had a moment where I couldn't explain it to you. So here's some key things, okay? Remember that if you distribute, you have to make sure the signs you write afterwards are correct. And specifically what I mean about that is, look at here. We have a negative 5 distributing to a 10, but I didn't write negative 50 over here. I just wrote positive 50. You should be able to know why that's wrong. And then if you do the negative 5 to the negative 7, this is still negative 35 when a negative times a negative is a positive. So that's what I mean by you should always make sure your signs are right. Look over here, negative 6 times 10 is negative 60. And then negative 6 minus 3 is positive 18. Okay. Here, oh, running out of time. If you notice here, I actually made a mistake. This is negative 42. Okay. And the reason for that is the negative number is bigger here. The way I think about these problems is think of it as like a bank. I obviously owe the bank 60 bucks and I just paid 18 towards that debt. Now I only owe it 42. Okay. That's why I had a brain fart up here because I was trying to see how I could put that into words. But as you just saw, I am running low on time. So we'll keep going. So you can distribute decimals and fractions. That's why this property is so important because later on you are going to be doing that. So that's just good to know. And then you should always have your answer in the simplest form unless you are told otherwise. And what that means is that if you have this, you should combine it. Okay? Even though this does equal negative 44, you should combine it and state that yourself, right? You shouldn't leave it up to your teacher to see what it is. So here are some practice problems. I will go over these in a different video. If you are in Avid, you can use one of these. If you're an 8th grader watching this video, I don't think these are challenging for you. All right. But if you're truly, truly confused and you want a tutor to explain to you, go ahead and use them. All right. But you better hope Miss Hickey thinks you are confused on this. Otherwise, you're going to get yelled at. So that's all I really have for distributive property to keep it short. I'll make a separate video explaining negatives because I couldn't do it here. And also make a separate video explaining these. Okay. So if you have any questions, you can always come to the tutoring room. I sit there eating lunch and nobody ever comes in. All right. So, you know, it's up to you on whether you want to get help or not. But hopefully this makes sense to you. All right. Ideally, you learn this in sixth grade and then you apply it to better concepts. Right? But it's okay to be in eighth grade or seventh grade and not know this stuff. We all have we all have different levels of where we're at, so that's perfect. Okay. So hopefully you guys are doing great in school and I wish you guys the best of